54. Here's what's coming up.
Presidential candidates Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump campaign in key swing states, both promising to improve the economy. The wars in Gaza, Sudan and Ukraine are likely to be center stage as world leaders gather in New York next week for their annual United Nations General Assembly meetings. And in our entertainment report, we honor the life and legacy of the famed Mozambican Marabenta singer Dillion Ginge, who passed away at 97. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
U.S. presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are campaigning in key swing states. Both are promising to improve the economy. VOA Scott Stearns reports.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of people for a town hall.
Donald Trump says auto worker jobs in the swing state of Michigan are threatened by the renewable energy policies of his opponent.
China is going to take over all of your business because of the electric car and because they have the material we don't. What we have is a thing called gasoline. We have gasoline. We have so much gasoline we don't know what to do. They don't have gasoline. So why are we making a product that they dominate?
With the majority of American voters saying the economy and inflation are their top election issues, Trump running mate J.D. Vance is keeping up their campaign's push to link economic anxieties to Kamala Harris.
Exploding inflation, that's on Kamala Harris. Groceries you can't afford, that's on Kamala Harris. Housing that is unaffordable for young American families, that is on Kamala Harris.
Harris's economic proposals in this campaign include tax relief for first-time homeowners, for new parents, and for small business owners. She told black journalists in the swing state of Pennsylvania this week that part of improving the U.S. economy is overcoming the divisiveness of her opponents.
Is the price of groceries still too high? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Yes. And I will tell you, I do believe that I offer a new generation of leadership for our country that is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism and, dare I say, ambition about what I know is possible in our country.
Trump says he is optimistic about the country, so long as he's leading it. He says the economy would be much stronger today, with tougher tariffs on imports, if he had been re-elected in 2020. In the closing days of this campaign, Trump continues to claim, falsely, that his 2020 loss was rigged.
If I didn't do well in 2020, I wouldn't even think about doing this. But we did phenomenally well, and bad things happened, and we're not going to let it happen again.
Harris's running mate Tim Walz is a former teacher who says Trump appears to be having a hard time understanding his loss 4 years ago.
I think I'm a pretty good teacher, and I would always give my students extra chances to learn. Sometimes you don't learn the lesson the first time. So Donald Trump did not learn the lesson the first time, but the good news is he's going to learn the lesson in November when he gets to do it.
Harris and Walz are virtually tied with Trump and Vance in most public opinion polls in the roughly 7 swing states that will decide this race. As Election Day draws closer, the campaigns will focus their money and attention almost exclusively on those states. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
Black political leaders in Washington are working to energize their members of Congress and their voters ahead of the U.S. election in November. VOA's Anthony Labruto has more.
Under this year's theme, Vision for Victory, the Congressional Black Caucus fired up its members with a renewed sense of excitement at its annual legislative conference. Vice President Kamala Harris is the first black woman to be nominated for president on a major ticket, and 2 candidates, Angela Olsobrooks of Maryland and Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware, could be the first 2 black women to serve together in the Senate. Nicole Austin Hillary, the president and chief executive officer of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, said excitement translates into resolve.
We refuse, as a community focused on the mission of empowering the global black community, to go backwards. We are at a moment where we are forward-facing, and we know that with energy, collaboration, and collective force, that we have work to do, and we will achieve all of the visions for success that we have for our community that are in front of us.
While most members of the caucus are affiliated with the Democratic Party, conference attendees said the shared struggles of Black Americans and African immigrants cross party lines.
I think this year it's especially important because just with the climate of what's happening in the world, it's important to know what's happening around the country with leadership, because our businesses depend on that. We need to know that there are people who have our interests at heart too, because small businesses, we thrive on patronage, we thrive on people feeling comfortable and confident in what's happening in the world. And
the annual legislative conference provides one of the few opportunities for members of the Black Caucus and those closely affiliated with it to interact with one another.
So what I hope to take away is I'm very big about networking and building my social capital. So I'm hoping that I take some career advice, some professionalism advice, but more importantly, building my network and walking away with more people within my network, expanding.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee for president, spoke at the conference's 2024 Phoenix Awards dinner in Washington, where they emphasized the continued strengthening of the nation's democratic institutions.
But Kamala and I made a commitment to you to prove that democracy is the way, to reject the zero-sum view of America that says, if you win, I lose. If you succeed, I fail. You get ahead, I fall behind. Maybe worst of all, if I hold you down, I lift myself up. Instead of embracing the bigger and broader view of America, if any one of us do well, we all do well. With help of the CBC, we went big and we went bold, and yes, the result, yes, we are better off today than we were 4 years ago.
Starting in 1971 with 13 members, the group of Black legislators has grown to a record 60 members in both legislative chambers of the United States Congress. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
Lebanese health officials say an Israeli strike on Beirut Friday killed at least 3 people and wounded more than a dozen others. It's the first Israeli attack on the Lebanese capital in months. The strike came after Hezbollah earlier pounded northern Israel with rockets. For more insight on the fighting, I'm joined by Bruce Fine, an American lawyer specializing in constitutional and international law. Bruce, it seems like the current conflict is being fueled by this week's mass detonations of pagers and walkie-talkies belonging to Hezbollah members.
Well, that maybe jump-started the escalation, but it's been brewing for a very, very long time. You may know in 1982, the Israeli Defense Forces actually invaded Lebanon, went all the way to Beirut, expelled the PLO in North Africa. It thought it could install a Christian regime in lieu of Hezbollah or Muslim political groups in Lebanon. It was a staggering failure. Their selected president was assassinated. So this is very unfortunate, but it's not novel. It's reached a higher level recently with the explosion of the pagers, and now we have aircraft bombings. But this is not new, and it's not going to go away. It shows it's a very intractable issue.
Right, Bruce. Now, how might this new conflict impact the quest for peace and regional stability, given that there are already ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hamas?
Well, I think it will greatly diminish the likelihood that there's likely to be any kind of ceasefire, any movement toward peace. Israel now, it's not just Lebanon. We know they've had attacks in Iran, Syria as well. The Houthis have retaliated in part by sending a drone into Israel. So I think this very much is a very, very great hindrance to looking forward to any kind of omnipresent
right. And very
peace.
Quickly, Bruce, who might be responsible for detonating these devices?
Well, all the evidence shows that Israel basically developed, an arm of the IDF, front company in Hungary, with a license to produce them, and then put in the explosives and sent them on when they were ordered by Hezbollah. And this is not anything unusual. The CIA had front companies. They probably still do have front companies doing this. but it seems quite clear that it was the Israeli front companies operating out of Hungary that supplied the rigged explosives in the pagers that exploded.
Bruce, many thanks for your perspective. Bruce Fine is an American lawyer specializing in constitutional and international law. Award-winning Nigerian investigative journalist Philip Obaji has uncovered human rights abuses by Russian paramilitaries in West and Central Africa. For more, let's go to Jackson Bungani.
Thank you, Esther. Now, despite being held hostage and tortured by Central African Republic rebels and soldiers, Philip Obaji has relentlessly investigated massacres, rape, and oppression by mercenaries from the Wagner Group and its successor, the Africa Corps. He's joining me now in studio. Now, Philip, you've been up close with some dangerous people. Tell us about it.
Oh, yes, I have been working in the Central African Republic, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger. And what these countries have in common is the fact that they have welcomed paramilitaries from the Russian Wagner Group. So yes, I have been focusing on investigating what these paramilitaries have been doing in the last couple of years.
And what are some of the disturbing patterns that you have uncovered?
Well, massacres and rapes. And that happens a lot in the Central African Republic and also in Mali. Oftentimes the Russians are interested in what they can get off the gold mines and the diamond mines. So, but to get this, they have to fight rebels and militia groups, and that's why they commit massacres.
Have you seen any shift in tactics or behavior from when it was called the Wagner Group to now the Africa Corps?
Of course not. And it's just the same thing, only different name, but same tactics.
What are some of the personal risks you've faced yourself in uncovering some of these stories?
Yes, I have been targeted by Central African forces and also the Russian paramilitaries. I remember, some time ago, some of the local recruits to the Wagner Group told me, don't come to Bangui, because if you do so, we've been told to get you arrested or even killed.
Yeah.
Yes, and then recently, just a few months ago, I was arrested, held hostage, and then tortured by Central African forces acting on the orders of Russian paramilitaries on the border with Cameroon.
What, did they found you on the border with Cameroon?
Yes, they found me interviewing local artisanal miners who were crossing into Cameroon. They were fleeing conflict in the country and crossing into Cameroon.
How did you initially get interested in this story?
Well, in 2018, 3 of my friends, Russian journalists, had traveled to the Central African Republic to investigate the activities of the Wagner Group. Unfortunately, they were killed near Sibut in the central part of the country. And I told myself and told my editors at the time that I have to continue from where they stopped.
Yeah. And what message do you hope your reporting sends to the international community and the global leaders? And what are some of the things they should do to address some of these human rights abuses?
First, pay attention to what's happening in Central Africa and in West Africa. And then try as much as you can to support the media in these regions to combat Russian disinformation.
What have been some of the major challenges for you, aside from your personal security, in covering this story?
It's been able to get as many victims to speak out. There's fear, and there's also the fact that people are not even sure if they're even safe by doing so.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of language do they speak? Are you able to communicate freely with them?
Well, they speak French, and some of them speak the local dialects. So oftentimes I have to go with interpreters.
Yeah.
So it's very challenging, but.
And how are you able to navigate through, it seems to me like a very difficult terrain.
Very difficult indeed, and that's why I oftentimes encounter rebels and some, other armed groups, because it's not an area that I'm very conversant with. So, but I try to be brave, and I'm lucky.
Are you in the U.S. right now to speak to Congress?
Yeah.
I believe. What are some of the things you're telling them, and what do you hope that they do?
Well, making them aware of the level of atrocities that the Russians have committed. And I want the Americans to talk more about what's going on in Africa, to pay more attention, and if possible, to support the media to combat the disinformation that Russia is spreading at a scale that no one has ever seen before. So, and then
why have they been effective? A little as we end our conversation, why has Russia been very effective in these communities?
Because they're paying attention, they're spending money, even though not too much, and they're taking advantage of the difficulty that journalists have in getting better pay, the difficulties that they have in getting access to new places. So the Russians have come in and helping them with training,
equipment,
with exposure, you know, and even with funding. So, and this is working for the Russians,
Wow. Philip Obadji, thank you so much for taking time to come and chat with us.
The pleasure is mine, Jackson.
We hope you stay safe.
Yeah, thank you, Jackson.
That was award-winning investigative reporter Philip Obadji joining us here in studio. Thank you, Philip.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jackson. Jackson Vunganyi is the host of VOA's Upfront radio program. World leaders are preparing for their annual meetings at the United Nations next week, and the wars in Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine are likely to top their agenda. VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Bashir has the details.
This year's United Nations General Assembly will take place against a bleak global backdrop.
We see out-of-control geopolitical divisions and runaway conflicts, not least in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and beyond.
The Gaza war is approaching its one-year anniversary, with more than 41,000 Palestinians killed and 100 hostages taken from Israel still in Hamas captivity. But progress toward a ceasefire is unlikely at the UN gathering.
I don't see much traction. I think both sides, in this case Hamas and the Israeli Prime Minister, seem to be gearing up for a protracted war, protracted conflict.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas are certain to focus on the war when they address the General Assembly on Thursday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also expected in New York. More than 2.5 years after Russia invaded Ukraine, peace remains elusive. Zelensky is likely to make his case for more military support and long-range weapons during a Security Council meeting on Ukraine on Tuesday and at the General Assembly on Wednesday.
For Ukraine now, the big challenge is to stop Russia advancing in eastern Ukraine. The future of the war will be decided on the battlefield, not in the UN.
Russian President Vladimir Putin will not be coming to New York, but veteran Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will. Diplomats will also meet to discuss the war in Sudan. Despite multiple international initiatives, there has been no ceasefire, and 17 months of fighting has displaced over 10 million people and pushed millions more into hunger. New faces at the UN this month include British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. And U.S. President Joe Biden will make his final UN appearance.
I think there is still some respect for his engagement with multilateralism, but I think there's also a lot of regret that he didn't give the UN a greater role in dealing with the war in Gaza.
Following 2 assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump, VOA asked if the United States could guarantee the safety of more than 130 presidents and prime ministers who will be coming to New York City.
We have pulled out all the stops. New York City has police everywhere. Diplomatic security is supporting Secret Service to also provide security for all the heads of state who will be here in town.
The Secretary General will kick off the Marathon Week of Diplomacy Sunday with a 2-day-long Summit of the Future, which aims to reform the UN system to handle new challenges, including climate change and artificial intelligence.
We can't create a future fit for our grandchildren with systems built for our grandparents.
Negotiations on a substantive pact for the future have been difficult, but it is expected to be adopted. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
Still to come, honoring the life and legacy of Mozambican Marabenta singer Dillion Ginje. We'll be right back.
Since the U.S. Supreme Court's historic decision to limit abortion rights, there has been a wave of abortion-related policy shifts around the world, including in Africa. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will look at the different perceptions and beliefs relating to sexual and reproductive health and the ongoing pro-choice and pro-life debates on the continent. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, security sources say an attack this week in the Malian capital Bamako targeting a military police training camp and airport left more than 70 people dead and 200 wounded. The death toll has put scrutiny on the ruling junta's military strategy and its claims that the security situation is under control. It's time for Entertainment Report, and Heather Maxwell joins us with some sad news. Hello, Heather.
Esther, hello everyone. Yes, that's right. This week has been a sad one for Mozambicans. Dilon Ginge passed away Wednesday. Now we'll pay tribute today with a second look at my visit with him in 2018 when it first aired on Africa 54.
Hey! I was born in August 14th, 1927. I learned to play the guitar in 1937. I started playing marabenta at weddings. I used to play my guitar with the bridesmaids. So I played my guitar and the girls joined me to provide entertainment at the weddings. I made my guitar with an oil can. It was just 3 strings. I made my melody with those 3 strings. The first guitar that I played was my uncle's acoustic guitar. My older brother was a makwayela dancer and he taught me how to dance. I danced so many other dances too, Shiparatuana, Shigubu, Shingomana. I learned all of those dances. I used to go everywhere with my older brother and we danced together. He taught me. There was a young boy at Bokisu, another direction from Moamba, and the girls asked that young boy, "Who are you going to invite to entertain everyone at the wedding?" And the young guy said, "I'm going to invite Francisco Sibia." And then the girls said, "No, we want Marabenta." So the girls created the name, Marabenta.
I'm dancing with the king of Marabenta! Hey! Woo!
Thank you!
Yay! So what is Marabenta, the meaning of Marabenta?
Marabenta means to destroy.
Yo! Who named him king of Marabenta?
It was another singer. His name is Fanim Fumo, another old Marabenta singer. Because there is no other man like me, who sings, dances, plays, and then all the girls when I was young. So all these things put together makes me the king.
What does he think about Marabenta music today?
Most people now still dance Marabenta. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the man was amazing. I feel so lucky to have been able to spend that time with him in 2018. Now, today I'm joined by my colleague, Amancio Miguel. He is with the Portuguese service. He's a journalist, also authored a book on Mozambican music entitled Marabentar Vozes de Mozambique, including a chapter about Dilon Ginge. This was published in 2004. Hello, Amancio, welcome.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. So, you know, we know he died on Wednesday, and he was 97, not, of course, in the best of health. But what else can you tell us about this great man?
Well, like the Mozambique's Minister of Culture, Kika Maturula, who's also a musician, she said this week, it's not time to cry, it's time to celebrate the life and legacy of Dilon Ginge. He was among one of the first musicians in Mozambique who was lucky to do some recordings initially in South Africa, where he lived between 1949 to 1951. I wasn't born then. And he came back home, he continued his recording, but only in the 60s. He like many Mozambicans, he went to South Africa to work in the mines, but he left the mines to pursue his music career. So in the 60s, 70s, he continued performing all over the country and promoting marabenta, which is like the main rhythm of Mozambique. There are so many other rhythms, but he was among the first to do the recordings and also to promote this kind of music worldwide.
Mm-hmm. So what that is his legacy. Is there another aspect to his legacy that he's left behind that you haven't mentioned?
He was a fighter. He always was fighting for the rights of the artists at large and musicians specifically, because as you know, you've been to Mozambique, there's no actually a strong music industry. So he was fighting with authorities, with other musicians to create a strong music industry so that musicians cannot only rely on some stipends they get from business people or sometimes from the government, but have a strong industry. So that was his main fight. He actually said in one in the article that I have in the book, like, I've done so much to the country, but what I'm getting is so little, so I need future generations to have a better life. So that was his main fight, to have the rights for the musicians and also to have a strong music industry so that musicians can live on, can harvest whatever they're doing.
Let's hope that we see that in the years to come.
Hopefully.
Are there any last thoughts that you have on his life or career? We just have a few seconds.
What's being said in Mozambique, let's celebrate the music of Dylan Ginge, like also celebrating music by other artists like Fanny Mfumu, who are also of the same generation, and he used to be that he's the king of Marabenta, and that's what people are celebrating, the king of Marabenta, the self-imposed king of Marabenta, actually.
Amancio, thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Well, that's all we have for entertainment today. Esther, back to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell for our entertainment reports every Friday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.